Fran, great to see you this afternoon.
Hello, Chris.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, so I am Fran Miller. I am one of the project producers at the National Theatre in London. And I'm also one of the founding members of an artist-led group called Non-01 that formed whilst at Royal Holloway University and has since been going since then. There's now 4 members of the company and we're about to launch our next project on the 12th, which is coming up on Monday.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you do quite a number of shows at the National, don't you?
Yeah, so I actually, from when I started, so I've actually been at the National a fair while now. It's about 8 years. And I started as PA to the executive director who was here. So a guy called Nick Starr, who now runs the Bridge Theatre just down the road near Tower Bridge. And it was when the organisation was led by Nick Heitner. And yeah, I was a PA at the Bush Theatre and then came and was PA to Nick Starr and sort of learnt a lot from him. And then our new artistic director came in, Rufus Norris. I was then his assistant and then started to put my hand up for things. It was like we were doing a gala performance and I was like, I'll give it a go. And I'll put that together, I'll produce that. And then gradually I just kept sort of taking on new projects. And we then opened, when we went into a big building project at the National Theatre, we opened a new venue called the Temporary Theatre, whilst we closed what was then the Cottesloe Theatre and has reopened at the Dorfman. But it meant we opened a sort of 100-seater venue. It was quite small, it was very nimble. And what was brilliant is then I started to produce quite a lot of work in that theatre, and the way that it was produced was, it was very nimble, it was very sort of maverick, it was much smaller companies coming in a way that the National Theatre hadn't really worked before, and so from there I started to become one of the producers here, and now produce work. There are 4 producers and we sort of split the shows between us all, and so I work in both the Dorfman Theatre, which is our smaller theatre, our huge theatre, the Olivier, which is a 1,200-seater theatre, and the Littleton. And you sort of, it's all about timelines and what the work is. But we split up all the shows between us. And I also, I produce our outdoor festival as well called River Stage. So I program and produce that and sort of created the identity, I think, and ambition for what that festival needed to do for the organisation. So it's sort of, what's amazing about the National is it's very, there's so much going on and there's so much work to create and there's so many artists coming in and out of the building. So you sort of get an insight and a way of working that's constantly evolving. It's why you can sort of be here for many years, because there's just so much going on all the time.
But you always get a feeling that you really do love the National, not just for shows, but also for the values it carries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly under our new artistic director Rufus is sort of the values of being a theatre for everyone and also being a national theatre. So again, I was talking about River Stage, but I was sort of, it was kind of funny. They came to me and were like, will you program this festival? And you're like, I've never done that before. You'd be like, yes, I can. Yeah, all right. I was like, well, what work am I interested in? And actually the easiest way to deal with that was just to go, I always program going, what do I want to see? And what do I want to experience? And what do I want to do? But you kind of go, well, we need to have other people coming in to take over each weekend, and allowing that platform, because what the National Theatre is great at is that people have an awareness of us. People know what the National Theatre is about, and we've got that sort of audience and kind of people look to us. And so if we can offer that platform to, like Home in Manchester or The Glory, which is an LGBTQ club in East London, and go, what would you do? And do it with us, and we do it collaboratively, the programming actually becomes much more exciting, and we get to work with new artists in a new way and become truly national. So I did feel like I was sort of going, what would you do? And I'll just help you with that in a way that I didn't have to come and think of all the acts, but it made it so much more exciting and diverse and an interesting program.
So have you always been the kind of person who's put your hand up and just gone for it?
Yeah, I think so. I've sort of, I've always been of the mentality, if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's like, you might as well try it out. I hope my risk hasn't, like sometimes you can make more happen because it doesn't matter as much. When Non-01 started, we created this piece out of the back of a car where there were 6 of us, there were 6 examiners. So we created a piece where the 6 examiners went with one of us, our voices in their heads, and the piece was all about missing. So those people that you meet on a bus and then you never see again, or what does missing mean to you? And we didn't want to be completely explicit with it, so we wanted to really open it up. So we made an interactive experience basically. And then when we finished university, we actually took it to the Southwark Playhouse, where for £5 and a free sandwich, you could experience our show. We did that. And at that point, we were then emailing lots of producers across the industry in a way that we were just like, why not? Someone from the Barbican came and experienced it and actually programmed it as part of their BITE, which was the Barbican International Theatre Festival, for a 4-week run. And so suddenly, as a graduate company, we were being programmed at the Barbican. And from there, that sort of gave us this great trajectory. And we've since produced work on the roof of the National Theatre. We did the closing show at the Bush. We've worked with the Science Museum numerous times. We've got a show currently at the Imperial War Museum. And I think it was just sort of through kind of that, putting your hand up and going, we can do this, or we can try this, or we can invite this person, was sort of that mentality that enabled us to get quite far with that. And
in the 8 years you've been at the National, what's been your greatest learning?
What's been my greatest learning? That's a great question, Chris. I think it's, and I still have to sort of remind myself of one learning, but it's just like, it's better just to do something than to not do anything. And that sounds like, but I think sometimes you can get sucked up here. It's quite a big building as well. It's quite a big ship to turn. And if you just do it and take a risk with something, you will always learn from that. And I think risk taking is part of the reason I work in theatre, because you will always, like, the way people create and the way we create work and trying something new is where good work comes from, I suppose. Like, and if we didn't take risks, I don't know where we would be. And I think, sort of after the pandemic and post-pandemic and being much more aware of, not more aware, but like having restricted budgets and having, less, kind of more restrictions on what we can do and things. I think still having that risk-taking mentality is what keeps theatre and what keeps ideas really, really fresh. And they allowed me to take a risk on River Stage, and they've allowed me to take risks with the glory, our galas. We had the Glory, actually was the first DJing thing here we did in the foyers, and I think if that can keep happening, we can keep testing stuff. That's what keeps me here, because they do allow me to kind of run with that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because the biggest problem people see is that people don't take enough risk. Mm-hmm. And yet, interestingly, in theatre, probably everyone takes risk because you have to be a bit edgy, I guess, is it?
Yeah, you do. And also to be doing something new and to be trying new ways of presenting something to an audience, or a new way of audiences experiencing that work in that way. Actually, it was quite amazing. We have a drum revolve at the National Theatre, and for the first time ever, I went into it yesterday. And what I found quite amazing was they built the theatre around this piece of equipment. But for the first, I can't remember exactly, I was listening to the tour guide, but for a good chunk of time at the very beginning, they didn't even know how to make this thing work. And yet they built the entire theatre around it. And they were just trying to, and it was huge and it's incredible. And when you see the drum revolve working in the Olivier Theatre, mind blown. But in terms of that risk taking and that technology, they were still trying to work it out before they'd even opened the building here. So it's that sort of mentality of like, we will try it. We just got to keep going and we will get there one day. And I really like that. I think that's, yeah.
Well, I always remember when we had a conversation, because one thing about you look at from the customer's eyes rather, or from the audience's eyes, don't you, rather than the actor's eyes. Is that fair? Because I always remember you telling me that the best shows are 90 minutes long now. Is that right?
Well, actually, Chris, I think one of my favorite shows is also 7 hours long. 7 Streams of the River Otter by Robert Lepage is incredible. But, I think 90 minutes, yeah, you know what it is. But I think it's also, it has to come from the storytelling as well. Like, you can completely get sucked into the storytelling of something and not even notice the timing of it. But I think there is something quite off-putting when you go, it's 3 hours with no interval and I've got to be out of the theatre and then I've got to cycle home, and when am I going to have my dinner? But that's like on a purely logistic point. But I think in terms of seeing stuff through an audience's eyes is the most important way of seeing something, because that's what is the point in putting anything on if it's always got to be for the people who are going to be experiencing it. And I think Non-01 by accident sort of found ourselves in that by always creating work where the audience is the most important element of it. They will make that work happen. And so everything we look at and everything we create is from the eyes of how will somebody else be able to take part, react, experience, put themselves on it, find out something about themselves within it. Like we are never the people to tell you about this. Much rather you kind of experiencing it from your own point of view. So I think that's why I've always kind of come to it in that way.
That's
I can
really
never, yeah.
See that way. What inspires you, Fran? I mean, you're high energy, aren't you? And you.
Yeah, I didn't even realize I was high energy until everyone was like, "Oh, you got a lot of energy." What inspires me? I think the feeling that you can make stuff for people to enjoy. That you can have, I mean, the thing with theatre is, you have to see quite a lot of rubbish to then see something fantastic. And when you see something fantastic, it stays with you and you're reminded that this is one of the most incredible crafts, incredible ways of telling stories. I saw The Wild Duck at the Barbican, and you couldn't breathe afterwards. It was so phenomenal. And you get something so visceral from theatre. But I think what keeps me going is the feeling of being able to put something out there into the public that people can experience, that can have that impact on somebody else. And again, sort of like, Non-01 have had a couple of experiences with it, and you're like, oh, this is why we do it. This is why we love it. Someone was like, oh, I took part in your show on the roof, and from having to think about that in that moment, I decided to sell my house and move to a completely different place. And you're like, we did, but we supported that, or we enabled that, and we helped you see that moment. And I think that's always really important to us, that somebody else can get something out of it. And it's kind of why I, as well as having a full-time job, you also have the other job on the side, because otherwise what's the point? I give up so much of my free time to be able to also kind of work with colleagues, but also they are my friends. But you have to see that other people are getting something out of it, and you're getting a kick from having those ideas and that inspiration and thinking differently and pushing yourself to use your brain in ways that you didn't even know about. Like one project we did with the National Trust actually a couple of years ago was it was called Put Her Forward, and it was thinking about how do we celebrate women. And we found out that, I haven't got the stats off the top of my head, but there were sort of more statues of goats than of women who weren't sort of, kind of full saw queens, and so we were like, okay, and so so we did this nomination process where people could put women forward who they wanted to be celebrated. And then with the National Trust, we selected people who were sort of like across England. And so we 3D scanned them. So we met all these women and we 3D scanned them. And then, in a van, Non-01, driving around England for over 2 weekends, we unveiled, I think it was, 25 women. And it was one of the most incredible experiences, because I would be going to mayor's parlors, people's gardens. Where else did we go? We went to some incredible places, and unveiled these women with the presentation that we did, and then we heard them speak. And I was just, I was there standing there and felt so privileged and lucky to be able to be hearing these women speak about their past and their trajectories, and why they're doing what they're doing, and why they were selected. And it's finding yourself in those moments. You're like, I'm so lucky that I've been able to create a piece of work that has this impact. It's that sort of, it's that sort of moment.
Now, in terms of leadership itself, you have quite strong views about leadership, don't you?
What, in terms of
what's important about leaders?
Yeah, I think I do. I also did I don't know if you've heard of it, the Claw leadership course, the short course I did for 2 weeks, which was fascinating. And I think I think finding people who empower others is the thing I really take away from leadership. It's sort of feeling that other people can have ideas and they're inspired by those that can then set them off on a track. And I find the most inspiring leaders are those you can go to with an idea and you can just keep going with that conversation, and you feel energized and empowered and feeling like anything's possible from it. That's where I find really exciting leaders, when the people who make the impossible feel possible, and those that are thoughtful in their approaches but really want to support those around them. And you see it in TED Talks, don't you? Some of them, you're like, you just sort of, you don't even realize you're listening, because it kind of, all their ideas kind of flow over you. You're like, this is brilliant. And it just makes you want to continue doing what you do in a different way, or better, and I think, again, it's sort of in the NT, because we have so many directors coming in to create shows. Again, I think you're quite lucky, and creative teams, you're quite lucky in sort of experiencing those leaders who are, at the pinnacle of their careers. They're working at the National Theatre, they're making this work, and you get to experience that quite a lot. And Rufus is also an incredible leader of this organisation in terms of his thinking and his ambitions for what we're doing. And you definitely, you want to do the best thing you can.
That's really interesting. How about failure? Have you been impacted by failure yet?
I think, Chris, I think I'm probably impacted by failure like all the time, and definitely. And I've gone for jobs and haven't got it, or you have this idea for a project and then it doesn't come off. And Nonzo One have applied for applications. We didn't get it, and we were up for an award last week, and we didn't win it, but we were shortlisted. And it's sort of, I think you deal with failure on a constant basis. But if you've got your trajectory of the ideas of what you want to achieve, you can find a way of letting it. You've just caught me on a really happy day, but it's how you deal with failure, I think, because failure is ever present every day. And what failure means to people, I think, is quite an interesting concept, because and it's how you let that impact you. But I think failure is part of the risk taking, and you take risks. And if they all succeeded, that would be really boring. And how would you know that you were taking a risk? So some have to fail. And I think I've learned loads from those that have failed. And I see it in River Stage quite obviously, because you're literally putting something outside and you're literally asking an audience to experience it. And so when you see something just fall on its face, you completely learn from that, and learn how to both kind of program and articulate it and take it forward, and understand why that happened. And I think for myself and failure, I think it's a constant evolution of how you deal with that on a daily basis. And I think I've got stronger from having experienced it and growing up with it and dealing with it. But so maybe it becomes slightly easier until you hit the next one.
Never easy. Emotional intelligence, because actually one of the bits you touch on is you are emotionally intelligent. You read people quite well. You obviously read audiences. Was that a natural thing, or did you grow with you?
That's very interesting. I think so. I did quite a lot of. I've always studied drama and theatre, and actually at college I did drama and psychology, because they felt so hand in hand. And I think a lot of that, the emotional intelligence, is actually kind of, I think, part of what you experience that in terms of characterization of what you're trying to understand from like another actor, or what you're bringing to it. And so I think I was probably taught quite a lot of it growing up in terms of the courses that I did and things. And I think some of it is attuned, and actually, I was talking about this song the other day. I think being a PA, you pick it up quite a lot, because you had to be really attuned to the person that you're a PA to is thinking of that person, what they want out of them. You have to just, without even understanding, you have to just read the room with it. And I was saying that the other day, because I think that's where I learned a lot of it, in terms of how to read a room, how to read what they want, how to read what's the next steps in it. So I think both through like my career and also what I've studied at university and college, I think they've both kind of helped me with it.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly powerful and useful skill, and I think I probably need to do a bit more in it.
Well, I think, look, I mean, we've obviously been in lots of meetings recently. You do read people remarkably well, which actually is a skill in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the other thing about you have high values, don't you? And actually, one of the reasons why you're tuned, I think, with the National is obviously the National has very high values.
Yes.
Is that something you could compromise on, or is that a non-compromised piece now?
And that's interesting, because I think it's interesting because, yes, the National Theatre has very high values, and I sort of understand them, and I understand how to reflect them and what therefore it needs to be shown. But at the same time, that's a huge venue, and I run a tiny company, and we have exactly the same, not exactly the same values, but the same importance is placed on them in terms of what we choose. And that's quite important, because we can choose less work to do because we aren't doing it full time. And so actually we are very specific about our values, and we understand each other's very well, because we've worked together for like the last 10 years. And therefore I think value is one of the most important things that you can hold on to on whatever you're working for. If you don't value yourself, if you don't value the work that you're doing, or the organization you work for, I don't think you can get as much from it. And understanding both your value and the value of the organization, and what their values are, and what they're trying to achieve with it, you need to hold those very close and very tight. And I think that is incredibly important, and I don't think you should ever not try and live up to those.
So, final question.
Yes.
What would you say to you? What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
That's such a good question. It's sort of, it's like, do I do it? Like, take risks. Believe in yourself, and do what you do because you love it. And try and it's interesting, because when I started working at the National Theatre, I knew I always wanted to work here. I used to see the posters on the tube, and I was like, I want to work at the National Theatre. And then when the Nick Starr job came up, I was like, I can do that. I understand what that is. I've had that experience. And then being his PA, I was like, I don't know what I do next. I don't know what this is. I don't know what the skill set is. That's because, Non-01 did everything. And so when I found out there was this job called a producer, and it was like organized and scheduling, and you get to work with artists, and you get to bring things to life. And I was like, that's interesting. That. And you just sort of take the risks, and you would take the opportunities, or put yourself forward for stuff. So you don't necessarily go into something knowing what you want to get out of it, or knowing what the next step is. Always do it from this, like, what's in your heart, and what you enjoy, and what you really love. Because I think I've gained a lot from kind of doing that.
So are you a believer in fate, or your character delivers your fate?
I don't think I believe in fate, and I don't believe in luck. I believe in hard work. But I believe you will work it out in the situation you are given. So, for example, I actually went, when I didn't get into the drama school I wanted to get into, I was like, well, I'm not going to do drama. I'm not going to do acting. I'm not going to do it. So I went to Cardiff University and studied English. And I was like, this was a mistake. I shouldn't have, I need to be doing theatre in some way. Like, I know that that's what I should be doing. So I dropped out after the first term. And I think my mum and dad were all right about it, because I'd never dropped out of anything in my entire life. Like, I was the person doing the ballet class 5 times a week. I was like, I'd never dropped out, and they were like, okay, you can come home. Like, and at that point I was like, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. I did well at A-levels. I was like, I have no idea. So I worked in ZZ's for a bit. I did some acting at the same time. So I did some adverts and stuff. And it was sort of my terrible gap year. And worked out that actually Royal Holloway University of London did this incredible course, drama and theatre course, and applied to that and got on it at quite an early stage, because I already had my A-levels, and went, and in the first week met the rest of Non-01, and by year 3 had made this peace, and now we're still working together 10 years on, when, you know, 2 out of the 4 of us have children now. And so I don't think I believe in fate, but I believe in sort of doing what you think is right. And I think if I don't know what I'd be doing now if I'd stayed at Cardiff, but I think for me, I've had some amazing opportunities with 101 and have made something brilliant with people that I love. And so, you know, I think that has to have seen that in the right choice at that time, even though it felt appalling when I walked away from something that I'd never walked away from anything before.
How did that change you?
I think it made me slightly stronger in my decision making, in going with my gut. I knew it wasn't right, and I knew I wasn't happy, and I was doing, you know, so I was working really hard, doing really well, in a surprising way, because I was always terrible at essays, but they seemed to be coming back going well. But I was just like, this, I'm not happy. I'm really unhappy. And I really listened to that, and made change, and could step away, you know, in a way that was then going to cost me thousands of pounds more, because it was that moment that it changed from being 1,000 a year to like 3, and now it's so much more money. But it was, you know, it was definitely not the easy choice to make. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And so I think it made me stronger in my decision making going forward.
Really interesting. But Fran, it's been a delight talking to you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
It's been a real pleasure.